Welcome to JWL Sports, where we review all the best sports tips from around the world. If this is your first time checking out a video, please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. We're watching a clip of The Herd with Colin Cowherd talking about Brock Purdy and the fact that he's going to be eligible for a lot of money. And the whole question is how much money do you pay him? And Colin, I guess, is talking about, which I haven't watched this clip yet, but I can see from the title that the 49ers could potentially resemble the Cowboys. And I assume with Dak Prescott and how they're paying Dak a lot of money, and they're not getting, they're paying him like he is the level of Patrick Mahomes, and he's not Patrick Mahomes. And so it's just like, what do you do now when you have to keep paying him more money and you need better players to make your team better, but you can't afford it because you're paying your quarterback so much money? So let's take a listen to see what Colin has to say, and then we'll break it down from there.
Who, according to their owner, are going now to pay Brock Purdy and give him a, quote, massive extension. It's what the market is. What's Brock Purdy's market? The Niners are at a very fragile point, and I'm not sure they understand it. The fact that Brock Purdy is cheap/free allows a stacked roster, and they've missed badly on enough draft picks. They're actually perilously thin. Trey Lance, whiff. Javon Kinlaw, whiff. Couple of third-round running backs, whiff. Danny Gray, wide receiver, whiff. Outside of left tackle, Trent Williams. It's not a very good offensive line. They've missed on too many. They're becoming very much the Dallas Cowboys. And the Cowboys, about 6-7 years ago, before they paid Dak the big money, you had that feeling, right? Ooh, it looks special, Super Bowl team. But once they paid a good quarterback great money, the Cowboys are no longer Super Bowl viable. It's all fool's gold. They had to let go of a Dalton Schultz and Amari Cooper. Dallas got thin in spots and one or two injuries, and it all came crumbling down. This 49er machine, just like the S&P 500, is driven by three things. Kyle Shanahan's scheme, Brock Purdy's free.
Had to take a second there.
And Christian McCaffrey is dominant. And if you think it's about defense, the Niners' defense gets carved up by good offenses. It's not the defense. It's not the defense that leads them. It's getting older, and there's holes.
Thought the defense led them. Who's saying that?
Kyle Shanahan has won 75% of his games with Christian McCaffrey. He's under 500 without Christian McCaffrey. And how long can you give this kid 200 and 300 touches?
See, those types of stats I think are always a little tough. I'm not saying he's wrong there, right? Because it is just basic math. But just the way how we know books can be cooked or misleading is Colin was so high on Garoppolo, saying that he's a winner, he wins, and I'm making up numbers here, 80% of his starts, and that was, when he was with the 49ers and, all that type of stuff, and yet, here he is now, attributing all those wins to Christian McCaffrey, who Garoppolo played with a little bit, so it's, and saying, Shanahan, because before he said Shanahan, he's made a similar statement before in the past, where he was like, Shanahan, with Garoppolo, won X amount of games. Without Garoppolo, he did this. So it's just, you got to be so careful with some of these like blanket statements. I'm not saying Christian McCaffrey is not incredibly important. He absolutely is. But I feel as though Colin's trying to paint this in a way that is just highlighting how important everyone else is outside of Brock Purdy. And so if you pay Brock Purdy, and now you can't afford some of these other players, you're going to maybe be losing or winning less than 50% of your games. I think that is a far stretch. You will definitely be worse without having the players like a Christian McCaffrey. There's no dispute that. No dispute. But I don't think it's just like, you're either a legit team and now you're the Carolina Panthers. But let's take a listen and see what else he has to say.
I'm not saying if you pay Brock Purdy, it's going to come tumbling down like a Jenga game, but it's going to look a lot like the Cowboys. Very, very thin. And about the time January hits, you don't really match up. with a Kansas City, a Baltimore, a Buffalo, maybe a Detroit and a Green Bay going forward. You don't quite have the pieces. You know, you lost that one receiver, your tight end's banged up, Trent Williams can't play. That's the Cowboys. 3 or 4 great players and really, really thin after that. Essentially, Brock Purdy is like free shipping for Amazon. It makes the model work. You double and triple that.
Quick note on that. I used to be an Amazon seller, and it works for Amazon because all of those go into all that prices, all that money goes on to the seller. The seller loses all that money. The seller is paying for the free return shipping. So it works out kind of okay for the customer, and it really screws over and squeezes out the smaller businesses, aka me once upon a time. So, yeah.
Amazon shipping, their stock ends up probably looking more like Tesla. Every major business, they call it the Magnificent Seven. The S&P 500 are a big chunk of our economy. 7 companies. And they don't always hit year after year after year. Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Tesla, and Tesla's in the tank. Just a handful drive even the biggest machines. Brock Purdy being free is a big driver of that. So
yeah, I mean, listen, I agree with the sentiment of what Colin is saying, okay, right? We've talked about this a lot on here, about the whole idea of having a great quarterback, but a average team versus having an average quarterback with a great team. Now, if you had to choose, it all depends on your coach. Because if you have an okay coach, a decent coach, a competent coach, a coach that's deserving to coach in the NFL, if you have an average quarterback with a great team, you're only going to get so far. You just are. Because that average quarterback will kind of he'll technically be average, but he won't be able to come up in moments when needed. But when you have a Shanahan or a McVay or a Reed or any of these other great coaches, a Shane Steichen, they can find a way. So give them an average quarterback because they make that average quarterback play a couple notches higher, and they have a great team, especially offense now for an offensive head coach. And they'll be able to make magic. They'll be able to scheme in ways that are that put that team in a great position to succeed and win. But if you don't have that coach, then that model does not work. And everyone keeps talking about that model around the NFL of like, oh, well, don't pay your quarterback a lot of money, build up the team, yada, yada, yada. Again, that works when you have Shanahan, when you have Reed, Shane Steichen, McVay, that's when that works. Outside of that, we're not really here to see it work. Now, on the flip side, when you have a great quarterback, an elite quarterback, a top-level quarterback, if they have an average team around them, they don't need to have a great coach. It undeniably helps. I'm the one that screams that from the top of the mountain, saying about how much Andy Reid has, how much Patrick Mahomes has benefited from Andy Reid and whatnot. But you're able to make do a little bit, right? Again, perfect example, Sean McDermott, Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen. And there's plenty of other examples of this throughout the NFL, throughout the years, right? I don't think, Tom Brady won a Super Bowl. Does anyone really feel as though that, I guess he's a decent offensive-minded coach, but my point is he's not Andy Reid when they won the Super Bowl with Tampa Bay, or I'm trying to think of anyone else on the more recent side. Can't think of anyone right off the top of my head without wasting too much time. But so we have these types of situations, and if you have a great quarterback with an average team with a great coach, aka that's what the Kansas City Chiefs were for the offense at that point, they were able to make do. They were able to troubleshoot and navigate all the drop passes and and kind of, switching out wide receivers. That kind of had like a revolving door for a moment with, receivers in. Granted, they had the stability of, say, a Travis Kelce, and Patrick Mahomes is the Patrick Mahomes. So whenever you want to compare a situation, it's never always the best idea to compare it to the greats, right? To the Tom Brady's, to the Patrick Mahomes. But sometimes it's, these are the best and clearest examples. But there is the risk that if you pay Brock Purdy a lot of money, because he's saying that they could end up like the Cowboys and that they don't match up. If Shanahan wasn't the coach, I would agree. This is what my point really is summed up as. If Shanahan was not the coach and you had just another, Mike McCarthy-esque offensive-minded head coach or coordinator, however it, it unfolds in this example, and you had Brock Purdy and you had to pay him a decent amount of money, a big chunk, and now you couldn't, you are thinner at these other spots, then yes, I think the 49ers absolutely would look like, very similar to the Cowboys. I don't know, without all those other pieces, would they be able to cut up and shred the teams like the Cowboys, like they did, this past season? Probably not, but they would still probably win, be very competitive. They'd hit the playoffs, and then there's a great chance that they wouldn't be able to make do. Because think about it, they're not making do, they're not able to win successfully the Super Bowl, although I think that they're a success, to be very clear, but they're not winning the Super Bowls, and they have the stacked team, and the quarterback that a lot of people think is great. Yes, he's young, but if you guys think he's great, then he's great. Then what else are we waiting for? And then you have Shanahan, who is, I'm not even going to entertain anyone telling me that he's not a great head coach, because he's an unbelievable head coach. And so I think that's the difference. Okay, that's why Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love and the offense of the Packers was able to go. Matt LaFleur is a great I say up and coming just because he doesn't have the years of Andy Reid, or even really as much success as, say, the Shanahan or McVay, even though they're kind of all closer within, that generation of coaches per se. But LaFleur is, make no mistake about it, he is also an elite offensive minded head coach. And now we're finally going to really see what he can do. I think this next season we're going to get a great front row seat into who he truly is as an offensive mind, with a team that will be, going into their prime. And so, yeah, that puts you at a disadvantage. But again, Shanahan and Purdy, a great coach with an average quarterback with a great team, can clearly do great things, make it to the Super Bowl, even win a Super Bowl. Okay. And now if we want to say that Purdy is a great quarterback, okay, and you have an average team, well, then with Shanahan, they should also be competitive, right? The big issue is if Brock Purdy is just not that good, and now you pay him like he's great, and now you have to get rid of your team, you would say, okay, well, now you're stuck. But again, if they're going to look like the Dallas Cowboys, if you're saying that Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott are similar quarterbacks in terms of their ability to be the difference maker in a game, well, then you're going to give the 49ers the edge because you have Shanahan. So therefore, Brock Purdy is going to play better than a Dak Prescott. Brock Purdy will be put in more situations to succeed than Brock Purdy. You'll also be able to draft other players with Shanahan's. Yes, they absolutely whiff on picks, but nowhere is it written that they're just going to continue to miss, right? Everyone admits that drafting is not easy, that it is a crapshoot, that there is like a 20, 30% chance, depending on the round and depending on the position, of a success and hit rate. That just happens. So even if you pay Brock Purdy big money right now, and it takes time for you, and you do have to get rid of, or Kittle's banged up or now retiring, and McCaffrey's just done past his prime, right into the future, you're gonna pay Brock Purdy, but you'll be able to just kind of continue to build around him. I'm not saying it's ideal. The ideal situation is for you to have won with Brock Purdy on the cheapest deal, or get Brock Purdy to take not, $55-60 million. I have no idea what Brock Purdy can get. I really, really don't. I don't know what it's like to be drafted last, to all this, to have essentially half the league say that you're amazing, that you're like the next Drew Brees or Tom Brady, and the other half of the league say, no, you're not good at all. So I just don't know what someone like him commands. But if he's going to get paid like $45 million, right, kind of like a Kirk Cousins deal, I don't see how that's a bad thing. I'm failing to see how that makes you like the Dallas Cowboys, because again, you have a better coach than Dallas Cowboys. You have a quarterback who is either the same as Dak or has the potential to be better than Dak. I don't think he's worse than Dak. So already now you're better than the Dallas Cowboys. Okay? And again, you have the offensive head coach that can guide and mold the offense. And so I'm not entirely sure, where that puts them at this massive disadvantage. Yes, obviously, the best situation is to have an elite quarterback with an elite head coach, on a decent deal where you can now still build a team. That is what the Kansas City Chiefs are doing. That's what Tom Brady did in the past, right? That is what works, and that's why Patrick Mahomes is winning so much, right? Patrick Mahomes restructured his deal. Patrick Mahomes is making less money than Dak Prescott. That is the reality. So it'll be interesting to see what Brock Purdy. I'm not under the impression that Brock Purdy is going to be just, saying, that's right, I balled out. I was in the MVP. I made it to the Super Bowl. Pay me my money. I'm under the impression Brock Purdy gets it and understands that he can only be as good as the people around him, like 99.999% of the quarterbacks out there, right? I'm under the impression he gets it. He has a good head on his shoulders, and that, in terms of this whole should be paid a lot of money, depends. What do we mean by a lot of money? What is a lot of money to Brock Purdy in that regard? He didn't say reset the quarterback market. If Dak Prescott goes out, and signs and for $60 million a year, that doesn't mean that automatically Brock Purdy does. But the question is, hey, Dak Prescott's making all that money, and Brock Purdy has gone to 2 NFC Championship games and a Super Bowl. Dak has done none of that. So it is an interesting situation, but I just think Brock Purdy understands. He understands how valuable Shanahan is. He understands how much better he is with Shanahan. He understands how much better he is with people like Christian McCaffrey. I truly believe Brock Purdy gets it. He understands it. He's not a fool. He doesn't have a massive ego. He doesn't think he's better than he is. So I actually predict that he will take a pretty reasonable deal, and the 49ers will be able to continue to build around him, re-sign players, free agency, whatever needs to be done. And in terms of whether or not they can start hitting and be more successful in the draft, that's, you can't predict that. You just, I don't know. There's just no prediction. I mean, because under that logic, the Cowboys always draft really well, and yet the Cowboys are still the Cowboys. So there's obviously more to the story. I rag on the Cowboys a lot, but who doesn't think that the Cowboys would be, and Dak Prescott would be significantly better if you got rid of McCarthy and put Shanahan or McVay up there? I know I do. So it's coaching matters. You have Shanahan, there's a great, fantastic chance that your offense will always be quite potent. Just the way I see it. But those are just my views. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you think the 49ers should do with Brock Purdy? And do you think they're kind of en route to becoming the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment. So whether you agree or disagree with me, either way, let's get into some discussions. Let's get into some fights. But ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see a part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to. Something that we're really excited to be part of, and I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really, really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.